also Princess Charlotte's 8th birthday.
Happy birthday, Your Royal Highness.
Let us know your thoughts on everything we're discussing this morning. Be part of our show down here as we build up the anticipation to the weekend. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. But first of all, here is your latest news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 9:32. Unions and NHS employers are meeting today in the hope to resolve the long-running pay dispute between health workers and the government. Members of the Royal College of Nursing and Unite have rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise for this year and a cash sum for last year. But other unions, including Unison, the GMB and those representing midwives and physiotherapists, have voted in favour. Food inflation went up to another record high in April, but lower prices are on the horizon, according to the British Retail Consortium. Grocery prices rose by 15.7% last month, the biggest annual increase in records going back almost 2 decades. The figures also show that prices for non-food items slowed down because of spring discounts on clothing and furniture. House prices showed signs of stabilising last month, according to mortgage lender Nationwide. The price of a home rose by 0.5% after falling for the past 7 months. Compared to April last year, the average house price was down 2.7%. The final flights evacuating British nationals from Sudan are due to land in Britain today. Sudanese doctors working for the NHS are among the passengers. According to government figures, almost 2,200 people have been evacuated. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says there are still UK government officials and military personnel in the country.
There is still an ongoing humanitarian situation. We still have a presence at Port Sudan, both a military presence and a number of other government officials to help British nationals and their dependents leave the country. So we have concluded the air operation, the air evacuation out of Wadi Sedna to the north of Khartoum. It was a complicated operation, but I think one that has proven to be very successful.
Kensington Palace has released a photograph of Princess Charlotte to mark her 8th birthday. The picture, taken by her mother, the Princess of Wales, in Windsor, shows Charlotte smiling in a white dress with flowers. Happy birthday, Princess Charlotte. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev at Buckingham Palace.
Hearing the roar of planes in the skies above Lincolnshire is nothing new. Coronations, though, they are rare. Rehearsals ahead of King Charles's crowning have drawn the world's media to RAF Cranwell. Despite more than 30 planes and helicopters flying overhead, including Typhoon jets and the iconic Lancaster bomber, this is just a snippet of the full show. On the 6th of May, twice as many from all 3 armed forces will fly above Buckingham Palace to mark the historic occasion. In a front row seat here at Cranwell, retired squadron leader Terence Davey-Smith, who flew in the late Queen's coronation 70 years ago. He says back then he remembers seeing Buckingham Palace below, but was focused on not making a mistake.
You're flying low level over London. And you're conscious of the fact that you daren't have an accident. Otherwise, you're going to kill a lot of people on the ground. So everyone was really conscious of flying safely.
RAF Cranwell is home to the world's first flying academy, and King Charles spent time here training in the service. With College Hall filling in for Buckingham Palace, Air Vice Marshal Mark Fluin, who's in charge of the flypast, says there's no better place to practice.
It's entirely appropriate for His Majesty the King's coronation. I think we're well placed to deliver a 68 aircraft spectacular flypast on the 6th of May, and I think that was reflected in the practice today. 36 aircraft immaculately delivered, and I'm very proud of what the team have achieved.
Flypasts are common for royal occasions. We saw one last year for the Platinum Jubilee. And in 1953, 600 aircraft flew for Queen Elizabeth's coronation. For King Charles, it's dramatically scaled back. The importance for the pilots taking part, though, will be just as substantial. A lifetime on from his own coronation flight, Terence's advice for those flying now is to simply enjoy it. Will Hollis, GB News at RAF Cranwell.
Good morning. Well, the coronation is now just 4 days away. The King is going to attend a celebratory reception at Parliament today. He's going to meet the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, the leader of the opposition. He's got quite a lot on his plate, actually.
That's right. Well, it comes as new polling reveals the King's approval is at a record high of 62%. In stark contrast to polling when he was Prince of Wales, which saw only 39% of people say that he would make a good king.
Well, that's good news. Well, for more on today's events, we're going to hear from royal historian and broadcaster. He's with us here at Buckingham Palace, Rafe Haydon-Mankiw. Rafe, he'll be happy about that because that's pretty positive, over 60%.
I think hugely encouraging. Not only his own poll ratings, but actually support for the monarchy is at 2/3. You know, overwhelming majority of the public want to see that. Be a bad news day for those miserable bunch at Republic, the anti-monarchist anarchist anoraks who are always protesting glumly at royal celebrations. But it really just goes to show how over the last few months the King's been really able to actually put forward his new role, a new model for monarchy, streamlining it. People can see that he's a reforming monarch, I think, and I think there's some appreciation for that. Bad news for Harry and Meghan because their poll ratings continue to slide.
Good.
In America, they're actually ranking below Prince Andrew himself, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
So it's been a bit of an annus horribilis for them. There's a PR disaster of a year, but for the monarchy, this is good times.
Not brilliant for Camilla, the Queen consort.
Well, I think she can be very happy with her poll ratings, how they stand now compared to how they used to be.
What is she in about? 39%?
But I think what you're going to see, actually, once we get her into the position of being Queen, she'll be able to come into her own finally, and we'll be able to actually see the Queen doing what she does best, connecting with people, connecting with communities. Today, of course, she has a reception with Rishi Sunak and the King at Westminster Hall, where she'll be meeting with people involved in literacy and other issues that are close to her heart. And once people get to see that side of her, I think you'll see her poll ratings increase too.
What role do you think William and Kate, Prince and Princess of Wales, have played in the popularity of the royals now?
Well, I think they are the secret weapon of the royal family. They are very much the strength behind the throne. And of course, we know full well that their poll ratings are extremely high and extremely buoyant. There was a bit of a dip for all royals right after we saw the publication of Spare, Prince Harry's memoir. But it's encouraging to see how quickly that evaporated and how their support has now risen back to good levels as well.
In the poll by Lord Ashcroft, it's on the front of my newspaper, the Daily Mail, it also says even Republicans are finding it difficult to see what you would do to replace the monarchy with. I mean, what do you do? We have a boring unelected president, or do we elect a president? Because I'm sure if the President of Ireland walked into this behind us now, most people wouldn't recognise him, and I can't remember his name.
I mean, who knows who the President of Germany is? We know the Chancellor.
Yeah.
We don't know who these characters are. You don't get the world's media coming to the birth of a child or a grandson of a boring president. They come for the monarchy. And I think, I always like to say that when we had the Olympics in 2012, so much of it was sold upon the global impact this would have on Britain being sold to the world. That cost billions. For a fraction of the price, we get even more eyes watching Britain through things like royal weddings and jubilees and coronations. And there aren't many occasions for us to actually come together as a people. One of the downsides of being the world's oldest continuous democracy, we don't have a revolution to celebrate every year. We don't have an Independence Day like Bastille Day or July the 4th in America. So it's these occasions, weddings and jubilees, and particularly the coronation, which enables us to come together, street parties, build social cohesion. These are moments of forging national identity. And I think it's a wonderful way for us to actually celebrate our 1,000-year-old constitution, which is embodied precisely in things like the coronation.
It's funny, isn't it, Rafe, because it doesn't bear logical scrutiny if you were entirely rational about it, that one family should have all of this power, this influence, this wealth, this enormous house behind us. And yet it maintains and it lasts and it does form the most important part of the brand of Great Britain.
Well, the crown symbolises the nation. It is the great unifying force. I always say the crown is like the soul of man in philosophy. It's the life force of the state. All of our institutions, government, prisons, police, military, derive their authority from the crown. So you can't overestimate the importance that the crown plays in the country. And I think the most important thing at this moment is to actually acknowledge that, yes, you wouldn't create this today.
That's right.
But actually the world's most advanced countries are monarchies. You know, the UN lists every year its list of the best countries to live in by the Human Development Index, and they're mainly monarchies. The most advanced socially, the most gender equality, the most racial tolerance. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Britain, Canada, Australia. No one says that these are antiquated. In some ways, having a monarchy makes social change easier to go through. If you look at Britain after the Second World War, it decolonised and went through economic decline without the violence that France went through, for example, because in a way the monarchy made us reassured that things were still the same and still stable.
Interesting, because we often forget how many realms he will be king of, 14, something like that. And I read in the papers this morning that the Prime Minister of New Zealand happily coming to the coronation, but when he returns to New Zealand, he's going to start preparations for turning New Zealand into a republic. I wonder if that will be a domino effect for some of our foreign realms.
Well, we've already seen that happening, haven't we?
Barbados.
With Barbados and the Caribbean, Jamaica is going down that path. Yeah. But the King's always been very clear, and as was the Queen before that, this is a matter for the people to decide, and they've always very happily been at those transition ceremonies. They've been there for the lowering of the flags, they've been there for that transition, just showing how actually the British monarchy and indeed the British Empire before that was able to peacefully transition countries into independence. But you know, here in the Mall, normally for all royal occasions, it's a sea of British flags, but on this occasion, quite rightly, all of the Commonwealth realms have their flags up there, reminding us this isn't just a British occasion, this is a global occasion.
Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit about what he's going to wear? I don't want to sound like a red carpet sort of Vogue moment, but what he's wearing is symbolic and important, what he's going to wear.
I'll put my Joan Rivers wig on and start this.
Would you?
Very important. So essentially, the coronation is a contract between the crown and the people, but it's also a covenant between God and the crown. And so there's a sacramental element to this. And so the coronation, the Queen certainly thought this was a sacrament akin to marriage or akin to becoming a priest. And so the vestments that we're going to see, the wonderful super tunica, which is this ancient, almost Byzantine-style gold cloak, that's a symbol of basically of a religious rite. Just when the king's anointed, he'll be dressed in a simple white linen tunic representing his bareness before God, the humble king before God. And of course he'll wear the great robe of estate as he arrives in, which all monarchs have for their first coronation, and then he'll be wearing that at all future state openings of Parliament.
And Camilla, she will be anointed too, in that very special part of the ceremony.
First time we're going to see a Queen anointed, a Queen Consort anointed since 1937 on the coronation of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. An important role for the Queen to also play as the strength and stay of the King. And much like the King, she will have her own regalia, including the rod and the sceptre, and of course her crown, Queen Mary's crown. First time we're seeing a crown reused since Queen Adelaide, but in many ways, it's too long to discuss all of the ritual there. But there's a lot of traditionists were upset with a lot of things that changed.
Well,
but the core elements of this coronation remain the same.
Who cares if these old dukes and aristocrats don't swear allegiance to the king? We're going to have one, Prince William, the next king. That's fine, isn't it?
Yes, that's a homage of the blood. I actually think it's a shame you're not going to have a homage of the peerages. You know, one duke, one earl, one marquis, viscount and baron. It's quite lovely to have them in their coronation robes, their coronets with their keeper sandwiches.
What about one dustbin man as well as the dukes and the...
Well, as we well know, rather controversially now it seems, Lambeth Palace do want us all to take part in that Pledge of Allegiance.
And are you going to?
I will definitely be doing so. And, you know, normally I don't like modernisation of ceremonies, but I think this is a way to take the celebration outside of the Abbey to the whole nation and indeed to all of the Commonwealth realms so we can all participate. I'd actually like all schools to have their children do it on the Tuesday.
Are you going to do it, Beth?
No, I'm not. I don't like it. I don't like it.
I think quite a lot of people are uncomfortable with it.
I don't like it. I think the royal family exists because we buy into the notion that they are like us. Otherwise, there would be anarchy, as you said, there would be a revolution. We have to believe that if we meet the royal family, they are like us. And I have met them, and I'm no doubt you have, and they are actually quite normal. The idea that you, with that unconditionally, say out loud a vow and allegiance to somebody cements the notion that they are more important than us.
It's not to the person.
It's the institution.
It's the office.
Well,
that's why we include heirs and
and
successors.
his heirs and successors. That makes me deeply uncomfortable. And I think, don't make us consider that. Like, the reason that the royal family lasts is because we don't overthink that issue. And when you're asking us to sit at home with our glass of champagne and swear allegiance to you, that's a power shift that I find a little troubling.
But remember, this is an invitation. It's not an edict, so we're not being forced to do it.
We would never do it.
No, wouldn't it be interesting to see the cameras trained on the face of the president of Sinn Féin in the congregation in Westminster Abbey when people are encouraged to swear an oath of allegiance to the king? She's going to have her mouth firmly shut. As the reason our MPs won't take a seat in the House of Commons is because they won't swear an oath of allegiance to the monarch.
But if we had this discussion 10 years ago, I would agree with you. But the problem is, for example, the youth of today are a complete anomaly in terms of their level of support for the monarchy. And that's because they're not being taught at schools about our civic institutions. And we know over the last few decades there's been a left-wing takeover of much of our schools, where fewer than 10% of teachers now vote for the Conservative Party or centre-right parties. They're not getting that education. And that's why I think something like this is actually quite important. Now, the government has just announced that they want to have coronation lessons for children, but they aren't compulsory. They just have advisory packs.
They had them before the coronation.
I know that. Too little, too late, I would say. But that's why I'm in favour of this. I want people to actually engage and participate in our constitution.
But you see, I think the children should buy into this because they understand the good that the royal family do and that they understand the value. You can't literally brainwash them into believing that the royal family in a
they've been brainwashed in so many ways.
They are, but in a semi sort of North Korean style way that you get the whole class just sitting and saying we pledge allegiance. This generation are too smart, they're too canny, they won't do it. They smell a rat.
American children pledge allegiance to the flag every day. I think once every 70 or 20 years. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
And imagine that, swear allegiance to Joe Biden. Oh, my God.
Yeah, well...
There is a worrying thought. I would not swear allegiance to Joe Biden. I might to the King on Saturday.
But you see, I think the challenge for the next generation, as you say, they are questioning. They are a questioning generation, and they will want to ask about social inequalities, etc. But I think asking them to say this out loud it can cause more harm than good.
I think we need to understand that there's a battle going on for our children, right?
Yeah.
They're being taught that the monarchy stands at the apex of patriarchy and white privilege, that it's irretrievably stained by slavery and colonialism. If we don't put a robust, aggressive defence and actually promote monarchy the correct way, this is not brainwashing, this is just doing stuff that I was taught when I was a child, I'm sure we were, and our grandparents were, to take pride in the nation, to take pride in our institutions, and to actually look at the benefits that monarchy brings. None of that is being taught, so I think we actually do need... We haven't got much time left because this generation isn't getting more right-wing as they get older, they're staying left-wing, and we need to actually combat that takeover.
When you do the oath, will you be on bended knee at home, or will you be standing up or sat on the sofa?
I'd never get up again, so I think I would.
Very good answer. Very good answer. Thank you so much. I think you're staying with us, aren't you, Rafe?
Thank you, Rafe.
Thank you.
It's like having a good hard think on a Tuesday morning.
Now, you know we're approaching Coronation weekend. Royal fans are being urged to plan in advance because there's going to be travel chaos. Of course there is.
That's right. Engineering work is going to disrupt key rail lines, while looming industrial action will jeopardise travel plans for passengers into June. But joining us now for more is travel correspondent Simon Calder. Simon, it seems that every time we talk to you, there is a bad news story about how difficult it is to get around. What's the latest?
Well, look, I am really, really sorry. I would frankly be much happier talking about all the fantastic opportunities we have as travellers. But unfortunately, exactly as you say, and I've been enjoying your coronation coverage, we've actually had warnings today from the AA saying, watch out for traffic chaos. It will probably be quite localised. Obviously, anybody who tries to drive into central London this coming Saturday is not going to have a great experience because so many roads will be closed down in the Westminster area. That then moves to Windsor on Sunday. But there's also going to be, of course, thousands of local street parties which are going to block things up. So everyone's saying basically be nice and plan ahead. That's also the message just come out in the past few minutes from the Rail Delivery Group representing train operators. I'm glad to say, there are no strikes planned for the coming weekend. There will be significant rail engineering work on the line linking London Victoria, the closest station actually to Westminster Abbey, to Gatwick Airport and Brighton. That's been long planned, and so that's going to have some effect. You'll still be able to get to and from the South Coast using Thameslink trains, but there's going to be that which will unfortunately cause problems for a lot of people trying to get in and out to the celebrations. Transport for London says we're planning to go ahead as normal, but do be prepared for long waits getting into stations. Green Park, which I calculate is about 400 metres from you right now, is going to be probably the busiest station. Westminster also very, very busy, and you might have to queue. They might close some stations for exit or entry. That's what they were doing for the Platinum Jubilee. So central London certainly is going to be tricky. The rest of the country actually not looking too bad. But of course, anybody who's like me thinking, well, all lovely and thank you very much, but I'm actually going to take advantage of the cheap flights that are around to flee the country on Saturday. Make sure you got your passport sorted out, because the HM Passport Office strike is intensified from today. Another 1,000 members of the PCS union walking out in a dispute over pay and pensions.
Simon, this seems like a good news story. Apparently, a strike by traffic wardens in Westminster is to go ahead after a pay offer was rejected. That's the kind of strike I can get on board with.
I know that there will be many of your lovely viewers who are thinking, hee, great. But of course, the reason traffic wardens are there and have been there since the dawn of motoring time is to avoid people parking where they shouldn't, and also to control the whole business and really keep down the number of cars which are entering central London. So, yes, I think that will be represented as a quick win for a number of people, but it's not a kind of long-term solution to all the many traffic problems we face in a very crowded, congested and under-provided country.
Yeah. OK. Thank you so much, Simon. Simon Calder there.
I agree with you. I don't like strikes, but who cares?
I can get on board with that one. I tell you what, though, if you want to watch the Coronation this weekend, I know it's lovely down here, and there are amazing people working really hard. There's nowhere better than watching it on the telly.
I agree. And just as well, because if you're trying to come into London, there's strikes, there's disruption on the line.
That's right. GBNews is going to have the most amazing coverage at the weekend. We are going to be the only people who have been here every day. We've seen the build-up. We'll be right here bringing you all of the action on Saturday.
With the very best guests. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. So today will be mainly dry, but with some sunny spells around too, and this is quite the change from what we saw over the weekend. And this is due to low pressure moving away to the east, allowing high pressure to build over the UK. And this is going to bring us a little bit of a settled interlude over the next few days. Now, looking at the detail for this morning, it was quite a grey and gloomy start for some, with quite a bit of cloud and some mist and fog around as well. A brighter start across Northern Ireland and Scotland, albeit quite chilly. Though further south, we will see that cloud breaking up into this afternoon, allowing for some sunny spells. But in any thicker cloud, we might just see the odd spot of rain and drizzle. It'll be feeling cooler today compared to yesterday, especially down North Sea coasts in a northeasterly breeze. Now, as we go through to this evening, we look west towards some areas of cloud and rain moving into Northern Ireland and into Western Scotland. So a cloudier night to come than that just gone here, and it'll be a little milder as well. Looking further south, there'll be plenty of clear spells across much of England and Wales tonight, so it'll be a cooler night here, again with some mist and fog patches possible. So as we start Wednesday morning, it's a cloudier start across Northern Ireland and Scotland compared to this morning, with some further outbreaks of light rain possible, especially in the west. Across much of England and Wales, it will be a dry, fine and bright day with some decent sunny spells, but winds will strengthen from the southeast throughout the day, so it could be quite gusty to the west of any high ground, especially into the afternoon.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well,
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 10 o'clock. Welcome to The Point, live from Buckingham Palace with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. We are feeling incredibly lucky to be here now this morning. Britain apparently backs this new king. A new poll shows Charles's popularity is soaring, while Harry and Meghan head in the other direction.
I'm rather pleased about that. The King is meeting the Prime Minister later today at a reception at Westminster Hall, which is the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster, and where one of his predecessors, Charles I, of course, was sentenced to death back in 1648.
That's right. Secret talks with Sue Gray. Keir Starmer accused of tapping up his Chief of Staff while she was still investigating Partygate, plus the Leader of the Opposition U-turns on tuition fees.
Does he believe in anything? And thousands of pupils, I'm afraid, stuck at home again because those teachers have gone on strike for the 5th time this year. 22,000 schools will be hit. And, of course, it's exam period.
And happy birthday, Princess Charlotte. A photograph taken by her mother is released as she turns 8. I love love that new bit of film there with going around the country. We are, of course, at Buckingham Palace.
And the atmosphere is great. You've got a tourist stopping. We've had a visit by the protection dog, Primrose, who had an unhealthy interest in my shoes. So I'd trodden in something. But we're only 4 days away now from the coronation, the first coronation in this country since 1953. We are living through history, and we're going to be bringing you history as it happens here on GB News throughout the week here from Buckingham Palace.
That's right. If you are coming down to Buckingham Palace this morning, come and give us a wave. We've been chatting to people this morning, taking selfies with the police officers. The sniffer dogs are around. Lots of people working very hard. I think we're the only two people not wearing high-vis jackets.
We are, but I have had one on earlier, but I might keep it. Quite like it.
I went for my fluorescent pink. It's almost a high-vis jacket. Not going to get away with it, though. Let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first of all, here is your morning's news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thank you. Good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 10. Unions and NHS employers are meeting today in the hope to resolve the long-running pay dispute between health workers and the government. Members of the Royal College of Nursing and Unite have rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise for this year and a cash sum for last year. But other unions, including Unison and the GMB, and those representing midwives and physiotherapists, have voted in favour. Food inflation went up to another record high in April, but lower prices are on the horizon, according to the British Retail Consortium. Grocery prices rose by 15.7% last month, the biggest annual increase in records going back almost 2 decades. The figures also show that prices for non-food items slowed down because of spring discounts on clothing and furniture. House prices showed signs of stabilising last month, according to mortgage lender Nationwide. The price of a home rose by 0.5% after falling for the past 7 months. Compared to April last year, the average house price was down 2.7%. Teachers across England are on strike today following ongoing pay disputes. In April, members of the National Education Union overwhelmingly rejected a pay offer. Today's walkout is the 5th undertaken by educators this year, causing major disruptions. The NEU, along with 3 other teaching unions, has rejected an offer which included a £1,000 one-off payment and a 4.3% pay rise for most staff in September. GB News' Anna Riley is at a picket line in Leeds.
Teachers on this picket line are telling me, yes, it's about a pay rise, it's about getting that pay rise in line with the rising cost of living, but it's also about making teaching a more desirable job. Teachers here are saying that the pressures that they face in classrooms with high numbers of students in the classrooms, and also the retention crisis that teachers are facing at the moment.
Oil giant BP is reporting stronger than expected profits in the first 3 months of 2023, reaching close to £4 billion. The result was a reduction from the £4.96 billion that BP had made in the same quarter last year, but well ahead of the £3.44 billion that analysts had expected it to make. An update on the review into the departure of former senior civil servant Sue Gray to join the Labour Party will be presented to MPs today. A statement will be issued by the Cabinet Office, which will shed light on how Miss Gray came to switch from her high-ranking Whitehall position to take a job as the Labour leader's Chief of Staff. Miss Gray, who led a government investigation into allegations of parties being held in Downing Street during the coronavirus lockdown, could be found to have broken the Civil Service Code when she entered talks with the Labour Party. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds has praised Sue Gray as one of the best people in government.
He wasn't the original person investigating these Partygate scandal allegations. It was somebody else. He unfortunately had to resign because he'd been at the parties he was supposed to be investigating. So look, we're trying to pick the best people to help us build a team for government. We'll follow the official process, whatever it might be, to get those people.
The final flights evacuating British nationals from Sudan are due to land in Britain today. Sudanese doctors working for the NHS are among the passengers. According to government figures, almost 2,200 have been evacuated. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says there are still UK government officials and military personnel in Sudan.
There is still an ongoing humanitarian situation. We still have a presence at Port Sudan, both a military presence and a number of other government officials to help British nationals and their dependents leave the country. So we have concluded the air operation, the air evacuation out of Wadi Sedna to the north of Khartoum. It was a complicated operation, but I think one that has proven to be very successful.
Councils in England have approved more than 3,000 road closures for street parties during the Coronation. The most popular day for the royal celebration is Sunday, when 62% of festivities will take place. That's according to the Platform One network. The street parties will cover a total of 263 miles. And King Charles's coronation is expected to provide a £120 million boost to pubs across the UK. The British Beer and Pub Association says local pubs and breweries are planning to pour 62 million pints over the bank holiday weekend. Pubs will be allowed to stay open until 1 a.m. And celebrities attended the Met Gala in New York last night, with this year's theme celebrating the iconic designer Karl Lagerfeld. Just a warning, the following footage contains flashing images. One of the noteworthy outfits of the evening was a furry costume worn by actor Jared Leto. The performer came to the event as Lagerfeld's cat. The British stars also made their mark on the runway, with Lily James, Florence Pugh and Bella Ramsey making their tribute to the late designer. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev at Buckingham Palace.
Well, here we are in front of arguably the most famous building on the planet. Could you think of any building that's more iconic, better well known than Buckingham Palace? Even though nobody lives there anymore, it is still the spiritual home of the monarchy, and we are here, of course, because we're just 4 days away from the coronation of King Charles III, the first coronation in this country since 1953.
That's right, he's going to attend a celebratory reception at Parliament later today, where he'll meet the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition.
And it's in Westminster Hall, the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster, where his illustrious predecessor Charles I was tried and sentenced to death. I don't suppose they'll dwell on that. Although there is a plaque on the floor at the very point where Charles I stood.
Well, there's new polling today. There's a lot of reasons for King Charles to be happy. His approval rate is a record high of 62%. That's in stark contrast to polling when he was the Prince of Wales, when there was just 39% of you at home said that you thought he would make a good king.
Well, we're talking about this. We're delighted to have with us here at Buckingham Palace is the royal commentator, Rafe Haydar-Mankiw. Rafe, they're always nervous, aren't they, about the polls, but this is very positive.
It's very positive. And, you know, Ipsos Mori, the polling company, has asked the same question of the British public for over 30 years, whether they support the monarchy. And it's been their most stable response that they've ever had over those 30 years. Except recently there's been a bit of a dip, and this has brought it back up to where it has been for the last 30 years. And that must be hugely encouraging to know that support is basically somewhat similar to the support that Her Majesty enjoyed at the time of the monarchy. I'm talking about the support for the monarchy here rather than for the Prince.
So
King Charles.
Just to be clear then about this poll, it is an Ipsos Mori poll.
No, this isn't. But I'm saying this
is an Ashcroft poll.
This is by Lord Ashcroft, but it supports the 30-year polling of Ipsos Mori, which has been stable, showing 2/3 to 3/4 of the public support the monarchy, and we're now back into that realm again.
Do you think he's done pretty well since the death of his mother? Has he put a foot wrong, Prince Charles, King Charles?
Well, he hasn't put a foot wrong at all, but he's had such a hard slog through the last few months because, of course, the whole purpose of this period between the accession and the coronation is to provide the sovereign, the king, with a chance to introduce himself to the public as king and to forge, to reassert and to reaffirm that connection and also to set out his agenda for being monarch, what his new role in the monarchy will be, how he'll transform it and change it. And unfortunately, we've had soap operas from across the pond, which have really taken a lot of the media spotlight away from what should be the real focus, which is the king, not other issues. And I think that's a great shame. Now, of course, we've had for the last few weeks, I would say, much more focus on the king, on the coronation, trying to create that positive atmosphere in the nation so we can have the best possible coronation. And I think that's in large part explains why there's been a bit of a pull bump.
Yeah.
He was an activist Prince of Wales. He cannot be an activist monarch, can he?
Yes, and we've been reassured that he understands that. Of course, we know he's had the longest apprenticeship in history as Prince of Wales, and if he didn't do anything, of course, we would be calling him the idle prince, you know. And I'd much rather have a prince, whether you agree or not, I'd much rather have someone who clearly believes and is passionate about this nation, rather than somebody who'd be sunning himself in Monte Carlo or Monaco, which was the other option, obviously.
It's also, today is Princess Charlotte's 8th birthday, and as is the tradition now with Kate, as we sort of still can't quite get used to the Princess of Wales, we're all falling over Prince of Wales, Princess of Wales. She's taken this photograph which she's released to the public. She does look beautiful.
She looks absolutely gorgeous, and you know, the Princess of Wales is a fantastic photographer. You know, this is the latest in a long series of pictures, really showing her skills. And there's a very lovely, human, gentle, down-to-earth air to the photographs that she takes. And you're quite right, Princess Charlotte looks wonderful, and of course she's really coming into her own. She's 8 years old, but you're seeing her character develop, and in the way, I mean, she's far too young to draw a comparison, but the way that she keeps an eye on her older brother and keeps her younger brother in check, you know, shades of Princess Anne, dare I say. Let's see what happens in the future, but she's sort of more of a sensible figure there. I think that's quite good.
Remind us, do we see much of William and Kate's children at the coronation?
So Prince George will be one of the pages. He'll be the first time that a future monarch will take an active role, and will be the youngest future monarch to actually take part in the coronation. Louis is far too young, but with Charlotte, they will be processing from the Abbey back to the palace, and so we'll have a chance to see them.
All eyes will be on those little ones, won't they?
Well, you remember, of course, in '53, the young Prince Charles at the coronation too, so we'll have that memory.
Glaring over the balcony, hands on, head on, chin on his hands, looking, but he wasn't made to stay for the whole 3.5 hours, I don't think, was he? Prince Charles?
No, they're always beautifully behaved.
They are.
I mean, the little one's got a bit of a glint in his eye. Little Louis, he looks like he might be fun as the years go by. But I don't know how she gets them to behave. And I mean, they've sat through concerts. We watched them sit through the concert here. They're incredibly well-behaved children.
What bribe do you induce a future king with to behave himself? We can't not talk about this poll and mention Harry and Meghan. How did they do in that poll?
Well, of course, this has been their annus horribilis 2023. Their PR campaign came off the rails with the backlash. It sold very well, but the memoir Spare, I think, really dented all of the wind in their sails, and we've seen them decline now, particularly in America, even more than here, where they're down to 22%. But in America, they have lower poll ratings than Prince Andrew.
That's quite something.
Take some beating, and isn't at all where they want to be, and may explain in part why Meghan has been so silent in recent weeks, or if not months.
And of course, we're just going to see him, if the press reports are right, he'll be here for 24 hours and will leave within 2 hours of the coronation, because he doesn't have a formal role other than sitting in the congregation.
Yes, because he's such a busy man. We know that he works about an hour a week, according to reports.
And just to give you all an idea at home of what we're seeing here, there are crowds, even now, people coming along on Tuesday morning, taking loads of photos, waving to the media who are here. There is an absolute army of organisers in high-vis vests who are checking every stage, every doorway. We've had the sniffer dogs around here, tons of police. Lovely atmosphere. It's very calm, but everybody's working very diligently to prepare the weekend.
And we've had lots of messages from people passing by saying how wonderful to be here, what a wonderful day it is, and these American accents, Canadian accents, a lot of people not British, because most British people are at work, so it is going to be huge. If you imagine it's like this 4 days away, Bev, and they're all taking photographs of Buckingham Palace. I say it's the most famous building in the world. Nobody's lived there for ages, Rafe.
It's interesting because
it's a building site inside.
The King is still at Clarence House, but
Yeah.
interestingly, when he's at Clarence House, the royal standard flies at Buckingham Palace. Normally, only when the sovereign's in the residence.
Yeah.
But because of this strange transition period, it does fly over.
So the royal stand will be there, and does it? And what about at Clarence House? No royal standard at all?
They fly at the same time.
At
When
the
he's
same
at Clarence
time.
House, they also fly it at
Yeah.
Buckingham Palace, so that you know the King is technically in residence, if not down the road. But it's great.
He's
that
obviously not in
GBNews
residence now because it's the Union flag
That's
at the
right.
moment. He's probably in Highgrove on his way to London for this
But
reception.
I think it's really great that GBNews is here for these 4 days because
Yeah.
you're actually seeing the build-up every day.
Yeah.
The anticipation is rising. It's quite exciting to be around and just to see the stands, the horses.
History in the
And we
making.
do this so well. Like when we organise the Olympics, this is what Great Britain does so beautifully. Everybody knows their job here.
Yeah.
Lots of porter cabins around here. All the media tents are here waiting for the crews to arrive as the week goes on. Our national reporter, Theo Chicomba, is actually standing by for us. He's on the Mall to see what the crowds already are saying. Theo.
Good morning. Yes, we've been here since the early hours of this morning, and more people are arriving now as we progress into the day, and I'm expecting to see even more people throughout the day. And this morning we are kindly joined by Chris. Thank you so much for your time. So just tell me what you're doing this week ahead of the coronation.
To me, the coronation has essentially started because I'm chairman of the Coronation lecture series. So we're having some meetings, symposiums, seminars, reviewing what has happened in the last 70 years of the second Elizabethan era, and then reflecting and saying what will happen during the new era of King Charles. I was saddled with the privilege to speak on how education will change in the next 70 years. That's my brief. That's what I'm speaking about. And that's what I got my special coronation badge for.
And what do you think people can learn from this week? Because history is going to be made, isn't it?
I'm surprised, really. The schools should be shut, and all the students asked to come here and see history instead of sitting behind the classroom in reading black and white books and reading about kings. This is the real king. Come read it. I think the country is in a very festive mood, and rightly so, because we are entering a new era.
And what do you make of all the people that have already come here? We've got Anne just beside us, who's had lots of people come in to say hello to her, camping out here. What does that signify in your eyes?
It really means that the monarchy is relevant. When we look over across the channel and see what's happening with Macron, an elected king, quote unquote, because he's making laws without consulting Parliament and the legislators, and see what's happening across the Atlantic, I think it's a renewal of the people's faith in monarchy, because the monarch looks in generations and thinks in generations, but the politician thinks in 4 years. So we are having continuity, and one is excited about what King Charles did when he was in charge of the Prince's Trust. Remember when there were riots in inner cities? I was privileged to be chairman of the inner city education program. Guess what? The Prime Minister didn't come when there were riots. The Deputy Prime Minister then didn't come. The Leader of the Opposition didn't come. Who came? The Prince. Then. So the people are excited to see someone that connects with them. The youth are excited because someone that thinks about the future and says, let's conserve the environment. Let's do something ecologically. So his contribution to education, to ecology, to entrepreneurship through the Prince's Trust speaks volumes, and that's what's a magnet to the old and the young, really.
Professor Chris, thank you so much for your time this morning.
You're welcome.
As you heard from him, lots to learn from what's going to be happening here this week, as many people come from all corners of the country and across the world to witness history this weekend.
Okay, thank you, Theo. Theo Chicomba there, down on the Mall. If you are coming down to Buckingham Palace this morning, come and give us a wave, won't you? Give us a shout.
We'd be lovely to
keep it
see
clean.
you.
We are live on the TV, but come and give us a shout and have your photos taken down here. It's a fantastic atmosphere.
Now, Sue Gray, the senior civil servant, she held secret talks with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer while working for the team which was actually advising on the Partygate investigation into Boris Johnson, which effectively finished him off. That's according to a Cabinet Office report, which we're going to get later today.
So the former civil servant is to become the Labour leader's chief of staff, pending the result of 2 inquiries over whether Whitehall rules were broken. So joining us this morning from the studio is our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
good morning. Just remind us the backstory to this today.
Yes, it's a long and complicated tale, of course. Sue Gray was one of the people who ended up leading that original investigation into what became known as Partygate. Her report was interrupted a number of times, most notably by a Met Police investigation, but it contributed to this whole sense of chaos around the Downing Street operation. But the crucial question here that has been evading answers for a long time, that the Labour Party has been refusing to answer in any great detail for a long time, is exactly when did Sue Gray start talking to the Labour Party, start having conversations with Sir Keir Starmer, start mulling over the idea of defecting, moving away from being an impartial civil servant in the Cabinet Office and joining the Labour Party team. Because that's what we learnt only a few months ago. And there are big questions in terms of what was decided and when. This report that we're expecting to be given in an oral statement in the House of Commons later this afternoon by the Cabinet Office Minister, reports are that this is pretty damning, that it seems that Sue Gray did not follow every jot and tittle of the rules that you were supposed to, that the propriety and ethics rules that civil servants must obey, the Civil Service Code. It appears that that may well have been broken. And given that, there are some really big questions to answer. Of course, the government can say if someone leaves the civil service to join a political job or another job, they must take a cooling off period. We may well find out later today that the government is setting a cooling off period for Sue Gray. She may well not be allowed to work for the Labour Party for a year, perhaps a year and a half. And that's a big blow to the Labour Party were that to take place, because the whole issue with Sue Gray, what Sir Keir Starmer was attempting to do with this recruitment drive, was to say that the Labour Party was cleaner than clean, was squeaky clean, and indeed that Sue Gray would be preparing them in the run-up to government. Well, those two things may now not be the case.
Tom, just briefly, Sue Gray is always seen as this paragon of virtue, the former head of ethics and propriety. Keir Starmer really thought it was an electoral coup to have hired her as his chief of staff, but this has spectacularly backfired on him and her because neither of them were following the civil service rules, which she is absolutely steeped in.
Well, this is the big issue, because it did seem that Labour Party might have been a bit obfuscatory around this, saying that they weren't talking to her during the official Partygate investigation. But what it appears to be the case now is that Sue Gray was advising the Propriety and Ethics team as they were talking to this secondary Partygate investigation, the more recent one, the parliamentary investigation into whether or not Boris Johnson misled Parliament. And right in the middle of that time that Sue Gray was working on that, was advising that, she was also talking to the Labour Party. That's what we believe has taken place, but I must stress again, we need to wait for this afternoon to see that report in full.
OK, thank you very much, Tom. Still to come this morning, teachers are striking again. We will find out why in just a moment. This is The Point on GB News. Britain's...
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:27. You're with To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. And guess where we are?
Oh, guess. If you're listening on the radio, of course, we're at Buckingham Palace. It's wonderful. Everybody's setting up. Last minute rehearsals are going on here this week. Tons of people coming down here. Loads of people walking along.
And can you hear the drums?
Giving us
The
a
drums
wave.
are beating. They're obviously the bands are obviously practicing in
Yeah.
the grounds of Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, lots of police
Fabulous
officers.
atmosphere.
All the sniffer dogs preparing for the weekend. Now, schools across England could be affected by walkouts in the autumn term if coordinated strike action by teachers and head teachers goes ahead.
4 education unions representing most school leaders and teachers have said they will join up for any future industrial action in this long-running pay dispute. And don't forget, the teachers are on strike today.
Yeah, Kevin Courtney, the Joint General Secretary of the NEU, added that up to 400,000 teachers could be involved in the autumn walkouts, which is a huge number.
We're going to go now to Anna Riley to get the latest.
Good morning.
Good morning, Anna.
I'm in Leeds City Centre. Good morning. Hope you're both doing well. I'm in Leeds City Centre at the moment ahead of a rally that's taking place here, and it's going to be coordinated action with teachers as well as members of the RCN, so that nursing union as well, joining together, giving speeches about why they're on strike today and what demands they want to make from the government. It's obviously about pay. Teachers and nurses are saying that they want a pay rise in line with inflation, but teachers are also saying it's about the conditions. They say that they're going through a retention and recruitment crisis in education at the moment. Now, I was on a picket line earlier at Lawnswood School, which was actually visited by Gareth Southgate last week, and he praised the work of the teachers and the pupils there. And this is what one of the English teachers, Dan Hearn, had to say.
Recruitment and retention is the main one. Keeping staff is really, really difficult when every year the class sizes get bigger but resources get smaller, and existing budgets just strain and strain and strain against that. Look, cost of living has impacted on me. I mean, I'm struggling to afford to strike, but I'm doing so because I think it's important to safeguard the future of these teachers. Public support does seem to be good. We had Gareth Southgate in the school the other week, and he was supporting the strikes as well. So yeah, parents on the whole seem to be really supportive as well. After this picket, I'm actually going in school to teach my Year 11 class to make sure that my exam classes don't suffer as a result of this, and so a lot of other people here. So we don't really want to cause disruption to students. The thing is, disruption is already being caused to students by things like retention, by things like lack of resources. So if anything, this strike is to avoid further disruption, and ultimately you can't say that you value education and then not value teachers.
So that was the view from one teacher on a picket line there in Leeds this morning. Obviously reflecting on the crisis in education was what the teachers were saying on that picket line today, and we'll be providing more reports today as this rally begins in Leeds city centre.
Thank you, Anna. Anna Riley there in Leeds. This is so frustrating for parents. I can't tell you. It's not just the education of the children, but you've got to organise childcare to go to work. We need a line drawn under this.
And it's at a time when so many of the other public sector unions are settling these pay deals. But it's going to be an autumn of discontent if you're a mum and dad.
Right. OK, still to come this morning. We're going to have all the latest on Donald Trump's trip to Scotland. That is after your morning's news with Tamsin.
Bev, thank you. Here are the headlines at 10:31. Unions and NHS employers are meeting today in the hope to resolve a long-running pay dispute between health workers and the government. Members of the Royal College of Nursing and Unite have rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise for this year and a cash sum for last year. But other unions, including Unison, the GMB and those representing midwives and physiotherapists, have voted in favour. Food inflation went up to another record high in April, but lower prices are on the horizon, according to the British Retail Consortium. Grocery prices rose by 15.7% last month, the biggest annual increase in records going back almost 2 decades. The figures also show that prices for non-food items slowed down because of spring discounts on clothing and furniture. House prices showed signs of stabilising last month, according to mortgage lender Nationwide. The price of a home rose by 0.5% after falling for the past 7 months. Compared to April last year, the average house price was down 2.7%. The final flights evacuating British nationals from Sudan are due to land in Britain today. Sudanese doctors working for the NHS are among the passengers. According to government figures, almost 2,200 people have been evacuated. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says there are still UK government officials and military personnel in the country.
There is still an ongoing humanitarian situation. We still have a presence at Port Sudan, both a military presence and a number of other government officials to help British nationals and their dependents leave the country. So we have concluded the air operation, the air evacuation out of Wadi Sedna to the north of Khartoum. It was a complicated operation, but I think one that has proven to be very successful.
Kensington Palace has released a photograph of Princess Charlotte to mark her 8th birthday. The picture was taken by her mother, the Princess of Wales, in Windsor this weekend. The Princess is 3rd in line to the throne. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2471 and €1.1364. The price of gold is £1,590 and 21 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,867 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. Welcome to Buckingham Palace. It's 10:37. This is To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
You can feel the atmosphere building up, can't you?
Yep.
I can hear the drums, they're rehearsing, it's the military bands are rehearsing, lots of tourists here, lots of people taking photographs, lots of people shouting out. There's a very lovely, warm atmosphere here, and people know it's history in the making. First coronation since 1953.
Yeah.
Someone who's not going to be there...
Yeah, I bet he wishes he was.
It's Donald Trump, because he's in Scotland, he's on a golf trip, he's actually promoting all his wretched businesses, of course. He's on the west coast today. He arrived yesterday on the east coast to open yet another course near Aberdeen.
That's right. Unusually for him, he's kept pretty quiet so far, other than saying, as he landed, it's good to be home. This is, of course, because his mother was born in Scotland. So for more, we're joined by our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Hello, Tony. Did he get a very warm welcome in Scotland, Donald Trump? We saw him arriving live yesterday in his Trump aeroplane, his black aeroplane with the huge gold letters down the side of it. Very subtle.
Yes, indeed. I don't know about warm. Certainly the Scottish weather would have something to say about that. He certainly looked frozen to the bone as he stepped off of Trump Force One at Aberdeen Airport. But from the people, absolutely. Certainly from the airport, you know, he and his entourage received very warm welcome from some of the Scots waiting to greet him. And then as he arrived in his Aberdeen Trump International Golf Links course, the staff lined the drive on the way up to the hotel. There was a fireworks display, all red, white and blue bluster that comes with everything with President Trump. And of course, he cut the red ribbon on his new course up in Aberdeen, the MacLeod course, named after his mother, Mary Ann MacLeod. Now, as you just mentioned there, certainly he holds his Scottish links very close to his heart. And before announcing on his Truth Social platform that he was coming to Scotland, he made some kind of reference that he was going to visit his courses plural. We know he's going to Ireland in the next couple of days, but it's expected that he will make an appearance here at Turnberry. Certainly you don't fly all that way over the Atlantic without visiting both his golf courses. In Aberdeen yesterday, he definitely took to the course. He played around in his rather striking blue beanie hat, getting into the spirit of the Scottish springtime. And certainly if he comes here today, there's quite a sizable police presence, and I don't think that that's a coincidence. So certainly day 2 of Donald Trump's visit to Scotland, we know he's meeting a lot of friends, and we are expecting him to meet some of those friends on the course here in South Ayrshire today.
All right, that's Tony Maguire, our Scotland reporter. I'm always fascinated when I see Trump and its high winds, how that hair sticks to his head.
It's a lot of hairspray.
There's a lot of hairspray.
I did notice he was wearing a bubble hat when he cut the ribbon. That was probably quite sensible.
Yeah.
We're joined now by the chair of the Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Bev.
Should we read anything into the... Good morning. Should we read anything into the fact that Donald Trump has timed this visit on Coronation weekend? Is he hoping to steal a little bit of the spotlight?
Yeah, I don't imagine it's a coincidence, Bev. You know, the president loves attention, and I think he's very proud of his assets in Scotland and in Ireland. So, you know, it's good timing, and he had a great relationship with the Queen, and he really enjoyed his 2 visits to the UK, especially the state visit in 2019.
Greg, he's not been invited to the coronation. Joe Biden, the president, was, and bizarrely, in my view, Joe Biden has declined and he's sending the First Lady. That's a bit of a missed opportunity, isn't it, for the president?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it just shows, it's just another example of President Biden's disconnect with the United Kingdom. I mean, we're supposed to be the number one ally, the special relationship is long and real. I think it's I'm disappointed that the president chose not to attend, but look, you can see it, even on his trip to Ireland, he's got some real cognitive challenges right now, and forget about his age, it's really his cognitive decline. These trips are exhausting. They're surely not for President Trump, but they really are for President Biden. You can see it in his schedule at the White House, very, very slim schedule, and he spends most of his time at his beach house in Delaware. So, I think it's partly, the lack of connection to the UK and his favoritism of Ireland and the EU over the UK, but also just the physical and cognitive challenges of making that kind of trip. So I guess in some ways I'm disappointed, but not surprised that he declined.
We had another legal case brought against Donald Trump this week, Greg. It does feel like they are determined to get him on any level. He's obviously dealing with the business misdemeanor action. What's the latest on this new civil case that's been filed?
It's a little early, but the problem is they somewhat lack credibility because there's been so many. And in some ways, I think the Democrats, I've said it on your show before, Bev, I think the Democrats want him to be the candidate. When they indicted him in Manhattan a few weeks ago, he got a huge bump. He went up 20, 30 points, depending on the poll, from the Alvin Bragg indictment. When they raided his home in Mar-a-Lago last summer, he went from +9 over DeSantis to +39. So these are moves that, I wonder if they're not doing it on purpose because it really helps them. And they've been trying this for 7 years, the get Trump, attitude from the left and the media that's supporting the left in the U.S., has been trying this for a really long time. Every effort seems to fail. I'm not suggesting that one won't work someday. But these issues really help President Trump, at least in the polls.
What's happened to Ron DeSantis, Greg? He was meant to be the great Republican hope who could crush Biden, crush all comers. His popularity has gone into reverse, and we don't seem to hear anything of him anymore.
Well, I think, look, he hasn't officially or formally announced yet. So, it's not like the press is really following around as much as they will when he declares. But there's a couple of things, and it's a great question, Andrew, and a great point. But, this is really early in the process, first of all. Secondly, the two have exchanged blows, but they've also exchanged leads in the polls. So I mentioned Mar-a-Lago earlier. DeSantis actually took back the lead after the Mar-a-Lago raid bump settled down a bit. You had a disappointing midterms for the president, for President Trump's candidates. And then, of course, DeSantis had a great re-election in November of 22, where he won by 19 points. So you saw Ron DeSantis catch up and leading in several polls as recently as March. But then you had the Bragg indictment. That really helped. You had a couple of perhaps missteps from the Ron DeSantis, campaign. It's not really an official campaign yet, but, a couple of missteps. And I think, slowly but surely, Trump caught back up to him. And then, of course, the Alvin Bragg indictment really, really energized the popularity and the sympathy for President Trump. But that could all change. The 20 or 30 points he got from the indictment, Trump did, he's already given back 10 of those. And I think the last point, which is really important, is, Trump and DeSantis, yes, they're trading leads. Right now, Trump is up, in the Real Clear Politics average, 23 points. But, that can change. It's really early, and I don't expect that anybody else is going to bump above 5%. That's the real critical point, it's really Trump and DeSantis. Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, all struggling around 3, 4, 5%. Again, that could change. You might have a dark horse candidate come in like Tim Scott, who I think, would be very popular. But right now, and again, it's early, it's Trump and DeSantis.
Really interesting.
And Greg, surely, if you are a Democratic voter, if you are a Democrat wanting to vote, you don't want Joe Biden as your candidate. How popular can he be amongst the Democrats? Surely they must be despairing.
Great point, Bev. I think the more exciting party to look at in this election cycle is the Democrats. You've got an incumbent president where only 25% of his own party wants him to run again. You've got two, I would call, fringe candidates in Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson, considered real outliers and wouldn't be taken seriously if anybody else was in the White House. They're polling at a combined 30%. I mean, that's just absolutely amazing when, again, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, really great qualified candidates are stuck under 5. And you've got an incumbent president where two fringe candidates are polling at 30. That should be really worrisome for the party. It should be worrisome for President Biden, and it should be worrisome for Americans. And it's not just his age, obviously. But Greg, it's the cognitive challenges. Yeah. And all his policy failures and outcomes are horrible. The list is long.
Greg, significantly, you didn't mention the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, who, if Joe Biden stood down, you think would be the automatic choice, but she's lightweight, she speaks gobbledygook, and she's even more unpopular than Biden.
I think a Republican candidate, whoever it is, could just play a campaign ad of her word salad comments. I mean, she is as almost verbally challenged as President Biden. And that's really who you, in many ways, you'd be voting for Kamala, because there's no way with his cognitive decline that he can serve 6 more years in the White House. That, I think you really have to look at this as an election. And I think keeping Kamala Harris on the ticket will hurt his probabilities even more.
Yep. Let me just ask you, Greg, about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. throwing his hat into the ring, because that is, as you say, you describe him as fringe. However, it is quite difficult to distinguish his freedom ticket from that of Ron DeSantis. And that puts some people in a very difficult position. If they aren't party political in terms of feeling that they have a visceral attachment to one party, that could split the vote. If the chances of him getting the nominations, you say, are slim. But he's interesting.
Yeah, and don't be surprised. I mean, he's polling at 2021 right now. Marianne Williamson's at 8 or 9. She's going nowhere. But he could really catch on because he's got the name, obviously. He's got the brand, even though his family isn't necessarily supporting him, but, you know, on the ticket. But I think that you'll see him gain some more momentum as people get to know him a little better. And yeah, Bev, it's a great point. You know, his views on vaccine mandates are consistent with many of us on the right. And so I think you'll find that as people get to know him and get to know his views on that. Now, on the other hand, he is a classically liberal Democrat, but he's not a radical progressive left candidate like the people running the White House right now. So there might be some appeal both for Democrats and Republicans that agree with him surely on vax mandates and mask mandates. But I think you might have some independents that go that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, always interested to talk to you. Thank you so much. Greg Swenson there from Republicans
Great to be here.
UK. Now, thank you. So we are here at Buckingham Palace as the coronation draws ever closer. Will you be one of the millions of people getting your hands on a souvenir for the big day?
Shops up and down the country, as you imagine, are filled with keepsakes, and our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has taken a look at what we're spending our money on. And I hope they're made in Britain, by the way.
From badges to bunting, we love to go all out for a special occasion, and the coronation this weekend is no exception. But it's not just putting on a big party. According to the Centre for Retail Research, we're estimated to spend nearly £246 million on souvenirs and memorabilia.
We've got some locations that go with our trails, we've got celebrations.
In Lichfield, the Paw Print family have worked with the Eden Project communities to create commemorative badges for the big coronation lunch. Owner Charlotte Russell says there'll be a way to reconnect with memories in the future.
So we know that people love a celebration and we know that they love a commemorative badge. So anything with a date on, people absolutely love. We get them out and we look at them and we remember the things that we've done. And I think it's bringing back those memories that people love. They can look at one thing and it suddenly brings back a day or a week or that whole adventure and experience. And they remember the things they ate, the people they were with. And yeah, it's just that real sort of memory.
Now, when it comes to the big lunch, our coronation spend on food and party items could reach more than £134 million. But if you're going to make a coronation quiche, you've got to have a plate to eat it off. In the pottery capital of Stoke-on-Trent, staff at Emma Bridgewater have long begun work on plates, a teapot and a half-pint mug to mark the historic moment. Head of production Stephen Beeston says they're expecting a big demand.
Probably, if history is anything to go by with the events that we marked before, then it will account for a big part of what we're doing. The pottery industry have got this long-standing proud tradition of producing commemorative ware that goes back probably the mid-17th century. So, yeah, it's just something that we have the heritage here, we have the expertise, and we're very proud to be associated with the royal family.
Whether it's coins or quiches, people across the United Kingdom are all wanting a slice of the coronation fun for the crowning of King Charles III. Jack Carson, GB News.
Here we are at Buckingham Palace, and we're still with Rafe Hayden-Mankute. Now, I'm really interested that Joe Biden turned down an invitation to the coronation of King Charles III. I know Eisenhower wasn't at Her Majesty the Queen's coronation, but it still seems strange, all the publicity he'd get for being here when so many other world leaders are going to be here.
Well, two things on that. Firstly, yes, there's no rule that they can't attend, but certainly no president has attended. Of course, prior to 1937 and the coronation of George VI, it was too difficult to come over. Yeah. This is long before the transport was so easy. You'd have to come over by ship, not very realistic. But then also, of course, we had the example in 1953, again, Eisenhower didn't come over. But I think the understanding also is that, of course, Biden is not necessarily a monarchist. We know very well that his mother slept on the floor of a hotel when she was told that the Queen had slept in one of the beds there, and she didn't want to risk the chance of actually sleeping in a bed in which the Queen had slept.
What
now, love Trump or loathe Trump, the contrast couldn't be clearer.
Quite.
The degree to which his mother was a staunch monarchist, and the degree to which Trump himself is an Anglophile, and we know quite clearly that from the number of jokes Joe Biden's told that he's not really much of an Anglophile. Of course, he was here for the Platinum Jubilee, so he does have a precedent for coming over. Then, of course, he was seated very far back in the Abbey. That's because all presidents are equal. Whether you're the president of Djibouti or America, where you seat depends upon how long you've been in office.
Do you think he was miffed by that?
And I think that may be one of the reasons, is that the fact that he's not used to being
Commonwealth leaders were in front of the
positioned-
president of the leader of the free world.
That's right. Commonwealth leaders, but also just people who've been serving for longer than him.
Yeah.
That's strict protocol, but it might stick in the craw or somebody.
Yeah. His mother also apparently said to Biden, if you meet the Queen, don't you dare bow to her.
Well, as I've said, this is part of his family's background. Is there's a very long streak going back generations there, where they truly resent Britain and they resent the monarchy. And so I think you have to wonder whether that did play a part. Because of course you have to remember he's just been over in Ireland very recently doing a grand tour, not for any political purpose. It was a family journey,
Family holiday, wasn't it?
So
Trump would have given his right arm to Beard it, wouldn't he?
He could easily have just waited and come over at the same time and killed two birds with one stone.
Yeah, exactly.
Crowds are building here. It's amazing. There are so many people coming down here this morning. We weren't here yesterday, but apparently there are many more people here today than there were yesterday. There'll be more tomorrow, there'll be more on Thursday and on Friday, and there'll be a huge crowd here on Saturday.
And there's literally hundreds filing past taking photographs. I think Bev and I are going to be in many, many photo albums in the
Giving us
United
a wave
States,
here.
Canada,
Come
Europe,
down.
all over, wherever. And we're smiling sweetly, of course.
Up next, we're going to be having much more on the build-up to the coronation on Saturday. This is To The Point on GB News.
Don't forget, David Starkey's joining us.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. A dry and a bright day out there for most today. Some places fine and sunny, other places fairly cloudy. The winds, though, for most are light because high pressure is dominating across the UK. Slowly but surely, weather fronts will be approaching as we go through the rest of this week. But for the next couple of days, as I said, most places will be dry. Not completely dry. One or two light showers likely over the hills of northwest England, southwest Scotland. It is fairly cloudy, but most places reasonably bright. And we'll see some sunny spells for South Wales, southwest England, and at times across northern Scotland. A few holes are possible elsewhere. And the sun makes all the difference. Where we see it, 19 degrees is possible, generally mid-teens. And it feels quite cool again, where there is a bit of a breeze off the...
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 o'clock. It's 11 o'clock. Welcome to The Point, live from Buckingham Palace. We're very pleased to be here with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
That's right. Britain backs a new king. The new poll today shows that Charles's popularity is soaring, while Harry and Meghan's heads in the other direction. The king will meet the Prime Minister later today.
Big reception at Westminster Hall. And Sue Gray, let's not forget the politics. Sue Gray, she is the great paragon of civil service virtue that Keir Starmer announced was to be his chief of staff. Whoops, she'd been secretly talking to Labour MPs while she was advising the government over Partygate. A report's coming out today, and it could mean Sue Gray doesn't take up that job for 2 years. Whoops again.
Thousands of pupils face a day stuck at home as teachers go on strike for the 5th time this year. 22,000 schools will be hit.
And it's exam period too. And happy birthday, Princess Charlotte. She's 8. A charming photo taken by her mum, who's turned into quite a photographer, has been released as she turns 8 years old.
Get in touch with us this morning, get involved with the show, get in touch with us, let us know what you think about everything we're discussing this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. But first of all, here is your morning's news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom at 1 minute past 11. Unions and NHS employers are meeting today in the hope to resolve the long-running pay dispute between health workers and the government. Members of the Royal College of Nursing and Unite have rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise for this year and a cash sum for last year. But other unions, including Union, the GMB and those representing midwives and physiotherapists, have voted in favour. Food inflation went up to another record high in April, but lower prices are on the horizon, according to the British Retail Consortium. Grocery prices rose by 15.7% last month, the biggest annual increase in records going back almost 2 decades. The figures showed that prices for non-food items slowed down because of spring discounts on clothing and furniture. House prices showed signs of stabilising last month, according to mortgage lender Nationwide. The price of a home rose by 0.5% after falling for the past 7 months. Compared to April last year, the average house price was down 2.7%. Teachers across England are on strike today following ongoing pay disputes. In April, members of the National Education Union overwhelmingly rejected a pay offer. Today's walkout is the 5th undertaken by educators this year, causing major disruptions. The NEU, along with 3 other teaching unions, has rejected an offer which included a £1,000 one-off payment and a 4.3% pay rise for most staff in September. But NEU representative Daniel Hearn says that teacher retention and resources are already causing disruption in the classroom.
I really want to cause disruption to students. The thing is, disruption is already being caused to students by things like retention, by things like lack of resources. So, if anything, this strike is to avoid further disruption. And ultimately, you can't say that you value education and then not value teachers.
Oil giant BP is reporting stronger than expected profits in the first 3 months of 2023, reaching close to £4 billion. The result was a reduction from the £4.96 billion BP made in the same quarter last year, but well ahead of the £3.44 billion that analysts had expected it to make. An update on the review into the departure of former senior civil servant Sue Gray to join the Labour Party will be presented to MPs. A statement will be issued by the Cabinet Office, which will shed light on how Miss Gray came to switch from her high-ranking Whitehall position to take a job as the Labour leader's Chief of Staff. Miss Gray, who led a government investigation into allegations of parties being held in Downing Street during the coronavirus lockdown, could be found to have broken the Civil Service Code when she entered talks with the Labour Party. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds has praised Sue Gray as one of the best people in government.
He wasn't the original person investigating these Partygate scandal allegations. It was somebody else. He unfortunately had to resign because he'd been at the parties he was supposed to be investigating. So look, we're trying to pick the best people to help us build a team for government. We'll follow the official process, whatever it might be, to get those people.
The final flights evacuating British nationals from Sudan are due to land in Britain today. Sudanese doctors working for the NHS are among the passengers. According to government figures, almost 2,200 people have been evacuated. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says British mission in Sudan isn't over despite the end of the evacuation airlift.
There's still an ongoing humanitarian situation. We still have a presence at Port Sudan, both a military presence and a number of other government officials to help British nationals and their dependents leave the country. So we have concluded the air operation, the air evacuation out of Wadi Sedna to the north of Khartoum. It was a complicated operation, but I think one that has proven to be very successful.
Councils in England have approved more than 3,000 road closures for street parties during the Coronation. The most popular day for the royal celebration is Sunday, when 62% of festivities will take place, according to the Platform One network. The street parties will cover a total of 263 miles. And King Charles's coronation is expected to provide a £120 million boost to pubs across the UK. The British Beer and Pub Association says local pubs and breweries are planning to pour 62 million pints over the bank holiday weekend, and pubs will be allowed to stay open until 1 a.m. Kensington Palace has released a photograph of Princess Charlotte to mark her 8th birthday. The picture was taken by her mother, the Princess of Wales, in Windsor this weekend. Many happy returns to Princess Charlotte. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev at Buckingham Palace.
Good morning, good morning. Thank you for joining us here down at Buckingham Palace. The coronation just 4 days away. The King will attend a celebratory reception at Parliament today. He'll meet with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition.
He's got quite a big day today, but that's another story. And it comes as a new poll reveals the King's approval is at a record high of 62%.
That's right. And you've been getting in touch this morning. Thank you for your views. John has said, when I was a child, anything to do with the royal family was a big celebration. Leon in Northampton, I'm glad you're throwing your weight and coverage behind the coronation. I wasn't too fussed before. However, watching the build-up has created enthusiasm that I hadn't realised was there.
Yeah, and John in Harwich says there is an argument to be had regarding monarchy or republic, but while we have a royal family, we should treat them like a royal family. Talking of royal, we're in the studio now with the most royal of all commentators, Dr. David Starkey.
I'm not quite sure what that means, Andrew, and we will not investigate, at least in public.
But we were talking earlier, both Beth and I are huge fans of the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. She's given an interview to talk about her brother becoming king. Most interesting thing I thought she said was about a slimmed down monarchy?
Yes, she said she didn't quite see the point. We're very tactfully put. But what she's really saying is the monarchy is slimmed down now virtually to the point of disappearance. Because if you actually look at the enormous burden of charitable activities, visiting hospitals and all the other hundreds of institutions that have got royal patronage, nearly a quarter of it is done by people in their 80s. That's the Duke of Kent, the Duke of Gloucester, Princess Alexandra and whatever, who are the Queen's cousins.
Yeah.
And you see them, they are devoted to duty, but sort of arthritic, and they'll be gone very soon.
Yeah.
And therefore somebody will have to replace them.
And their children are not working royals.
And their children are not working royals and don't wish to be.
And Prince Andrew wants his daughters to be working royals, and that's been resisted by everybody.
By the king, as far as we know. I mean, I think there's now a paradox. It's quite clear what the king wants to do is to have a monarchy which is socially active. I mean, the extraordinary new kind of congregation in the Abbey shows that. His own, he is the largest single founder of charities in the 20th century. Dozens and dozens and dozens of them. But they all need and expect royal patronage. And he can't do it all. The Prince and Princess of Wales, however hard they work, can't. Harry's out of the picture. And it's ages and ages before Charlotte and George are ready.
Yeah. I love Princess Anne. She's just brilliant, isn't she? I mean, she is exactly what a royal should be, in
well,
my
she's
opinion.
one sort of royal. I mean, she's...
Are you not as keen?
Yes, but there's a different kind of royal. What she is, she's, as it were, she's a kind of quintessence of both her father and her mother. She's got the no-nonsense of her father, and she's got much more. She's got the discretion of her mother. And she will not have said this without thinking about it very carefully. No. But equally, she's also, like her mother, a quite narrow range of interests. You know, again, horses and horses.
Prince Philip says something about the man she meets will have to be used to the smell of horse manure.
I think she put it slightly, being her father's daughter, she put it a little bit more bluntly. Yeah. But she, again, can we be really... She's making a very serious point. The king is wanting contradictories, as he very often does. He wants a slimmed-down monarchy, but one that's socially involved on the broadest front. And you need a lot of people to do that.
So we've got the Wessexes, of course. They still work flat out, but their children, there's no plans for them to be working royals. Beatrice and Eugenie would like to be working royals.
At least one of them would be.
Yeah. He's not going to relent, though, is he? The king?
I think he may be forced to.
Right.
In other words, if he's to fulfil his vision, and he clearly has one, which is this socially active, involved monarchy, it requires a serious number of working royals. He will have to find them from somewhere.
And find the money.
Yes, because they have to be paid for.
One of the things that she said, I think, is interesting, when they said, what kind of king is he going to be? That was an interesting question that the host posed to the Princess Royal. And she said he's had rather a lot of time to get used to it. She did her usual sort of dry... She has a very sort of knowing manner about her,
very dry humour. Very dry humour. Yes, he has. And so what we'll get an edited-down version of what he was as Prince of Wales.
Yeah.
At least I hope it will be.
Without the opinions.
Without too many of the opinions. But also he needs... And I would hope, actually, he has more heavyweight advice than he's very often done in the past, which will say to him, now, ecology was wonderful when we could just croon away with David Attenborough and say, aren't they lovely furry animals? But once people's heating bills go up, once they can't drive, once there are food shortages in shops, I'm afraid ecology is going to become very, very politically controversial. And the king will have to tread a very fine line.
But he knows that.
He knows it mentally. I think he finds it very difficult to do practically.
Could I ask you as well, what do you make of the king, or it's the Archbishop of Canterbury? Let's put the blame where, in my view, it should be. We can all take part in this proclamation of faith to our monarch.
Oh dear, where do we begin? I just finished making my documentaries, which were one broadcast last night, the other tonight.
On GB News, 7
On GB News, needless to say, when I actually looked at the text of the Coronation service, which is unique, because you've not only got the actual text of the service, you've got a commentary on the right-hand side, clearly written by Archbishop Welby. I have never seen a more error-ridden text.
Oh, really?
Or one that understands the actual service less. There's complete fictions, like inventing a wonderful mythic explanation for the coronation glove. Apparently, it shows that power, it holds the sword, but power is held tenderly, you know. You don't do anything too wrong. Of course, it was actually because the king's hands were anointed, and you don't want to pollute the anointing. But the much more important thing is, I think Welby has pushed the line that the coronation is purely a religious service. It's not. It's an act of state. It's also, as I tried to explain last night on the documentary, it's fundamentally a contract between the king and God, yes, but much more importantly, the king and the people.
Yeah.
And why, and the political nation, and why I think this business of homage went down, popular act of homage went down so badly, that hasn't been explained. It's not been conveyed to people that this is not simply some mystical pouring of holy oils, you know, that have been blessed by patriarchs in Jerusalem. But you know what? I think 99% of the population doesn't give a damn about it. I really don't think they care, but they do care about how they're governed and what the place of the monarchy is in government, and that's not being explained. I think if you were going to do this idea of a popular, as it were, response to the king, it should have been brought to the front, because remember, the oaths that the king swears are very extraordinary. The first oath is that he will govern according to the law. But there's a little problem. He's actually not fulfilling the letter of the Act of Parliament. The Act of Parliament of 1689 spells out a different oath from the one that he will be using. What it should say is he will govern according to the laws passed by statute in Parliament. In other words, this is a parliamentary monarchy, and that it's the central guarantor of our constitution. And I think what should have happened after he swore that oath, the one to do justice in mercy and in truth, and the one to follow the Protestant religion, that's the point at which there would be a natural response. So the king swears to do that, guarantee our freedoms and our liberties and our rights at law, which is what those statements are. You then respond and say, fine, we accept you as that guarantor. And instead, it's now tucked right at the end of the service, where it makes no sense at all.
Fascinating, David. As always, we are coming to you live, of course, this morning from Buckingham Palace.
Quite a crowd out here.
Hundreds of people lining the streets here, giving us a wave here on GB News.
I think it's because they know David Starkey's here.
Well, I think there's nothing better to do than photograph flower beds.
Yes, well, they're very nice flower beds.
Flower beds are beautiful.
They're very, presumably they're now expecting them to talk to them like
the king. Well, like the king, exactly. You're staying with us till
Thank
midday,
you, David. Moving on, health unions will debate the pay deal offered by ministers during a meeting of the NHS Staff Council.
The Royal College of Nursing and the Unite unions are continuing to oppose the deal which has been offered to NHS workers and accepted by an awful lot of them now.
That's right. All 12 unions involved in the talks will gather on Tuesday, today, to vote on whether to accept an improved deal covering the last 2 years.
And if they do, I think that's big problems for the Royal College of Nursing. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, joins us. Darren, if they say yes to this, where does this leave the Royal College of Nursing, which took their members out on strike again yesterday?
Well, slightly more isolated, there's no doubt about that, Andrew. We know that strike came to an end at midnight, and that is the end of the mandate. It seems, though, that the Royal College of Nursing is going to throw the die one more time, if you like, and ask again its members for a renewed mandate to go on strikes. But, of course, it's not just the Royal College of Nurses. We know that junior doctors as well and the Unite Union are so far not willing to essentially accept government pay offers. However, there is some good news, at least for the National Health Service and indeed for the government today, as you say, with a dozen unions likely to accept a deal for their members. It's going to mean a one-off payment of £1,655 for the last year's work and a 5% payment or increase in the wages in the year ahead. So all in all, that will mean that much of that strike action from those sectors will come to an end. But as I say, it does not necessarily mean an end to strikes inside the National Health Service. And unfortunately for patients up and down the country, we could well see further strike action, as I say, by junior doctors and nurses in the next couple of months.
OK. Thank you, Darren. Darren McCaffrey there. We're joined now by the Health and Social Affairs editor from the Sunday Express, Lucy Johnston. Good morning, Lucy. The public, I think, are getting strike fatigue now when it comes to the NHS. We're genuinely getting quite frightened, I think, by the fact that if we arrive at hospital, there's going to be anybody there to look after us.
Yes, it is. And I know I was speaking to Chief Executive yesterday who said that many of the leaders are absolutely desperate. We've got 7.2 million people on the waiting list. We've had about 500,000 operations and procedures cancelled as a result of these broad strikes. And even yesterday, he had to make emergency plans for his intensive care unit after striking nurses refused to go and help as they'd agreed to. You know, they broke their agreement there. So they are having to make manoeuvre in all sorts of ways to make cover. And of course, that puts pressure on the rest of the overstretched system. So I think everyone's desperate. And I think even nurses are desperate for a solution. But, you know, the Royal College of Nursing is digging its heels in and saying that it's not going to accept this deal.
Lucy, it seems to me the Royal College of Nursing is out of step now with so many unions accepting pay offers, and their own strike on Tuesday was judged illegal by the High Court. Are they not in danger of losing public support completely?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think they have got quite a bit of public support already. I think perhaps more than the junior doctors who will end up with much higher pay, about 30 years of, you know, six-figure salary and a good pension. Nurses don't have that coming to them necessarily. And so they do have support because I think they are, some of them, you know, claiming that they're struggling with the cost of living. And they're using the fact that there is, you know, vacancies in the NHS to argue that they're not putting lives at risk, but the government policy of not, you know, allowing for more recruitment and improving the NHS is putting lives at risk. But some of the NHS leaders and some people within other unions are actually saying, you know, through no fault, they are playing Russian roulette with people's lives because they're deciding on this action, which for the first time, as we know, last time at the last strike, they decided not to cover those life-critical services such as intensive care, accident and emergency, cancer care. At the last minute, they made some exceptions, but it still puts a strain on.
Yeah. OK, Lucy Johnston from the Express there. Thank you very much. You are obviously watching To The Point on GB News from Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, big excitement here. The atmosphere's getting better and better, actually. And
yeah.
It even feels it's getting a bit warmer too, because I've got to tell you, we had a blanket on our knees a little earlier because it was a bit chilly. But there's lots of people here. David Starkey's with us until midday, so lots to talk about. But also, don't forget, there's other big news today. Sue Gray, the senior civil servant, who Keir Starmer thought was a clever thing to make as his chief of staff. A report's going to be coming out today suggesting she was involved in deep talks with the Labour Party at the very time she was sorting out Boris Johnson and Partygate. Massive conflict of interest, a massive problem for both of them.
That's right. There's also a new poll suggesting that parents believe that school doesn't prepare pupils for work. I think I probably agree with them. We're also going to have David Starkey here for more royal coverage. You are with GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
No.
Good morning, it's 11:26. You're with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner on GB News. This is To The
And
Point.
a few moments ago with Camilla, the Queen, because her convoy just went past. I think she was sitting in the front of that car.
She was sat there, she waved. She waved at us.
She wasn't waving at me
clearly
in
thought,
bed.
There's GB News.
And she was waving at David Starkey. In fact, she was winking at David Starkey, I'm quite sure.
She was blowing a very clear smoke ring.
Blowing a kiss, David.
No, very clear smoke ring. And she was travelling incognito. There was no standard.
There wasn't.
And what's equally interesting
And no
is...
king.
And no king, and where was she going? She was going to buy off MPs, because remember, members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords have been excluded from this coronation for the first time since the Glorious Revolution. I wonder if the king possibly thought what the consequences are. What happens when the sovereign grant next comes up for review before Parliament? I think there will be a great many, there'll be a word which I shouldn't use on air that begins with P, off members of Parliament thinking.
Yes.
And it is the problem. This coronation has been seen completely not in political terms.
Yeah.
Thanks to the influence of Welby, it's been presented purely in religious terms, which frankly, and I speak as a high church atheist, I don't think many people in the country take all that seriously or understand.
And even cabinet ministers going, they're fed up because their wives, their partners can't
That's
go
right.
either. And of course we could have a Labour government next time. Labour governments are generally far more Republican in nature than a Conservative government. So there'll be a lot of Labour MPs very grumpy that they didn't get invited, because it's a perk that comes around every 70 years in this country.
And the problem is, you see, why? Why aren't they there? Because what the king has decided to do is to invent his own view of the nation. I had a really interesting conversation last Tuesday night at a pretty grand dinner party where there was a lady in waiting. That's to say, a
One
whip.
of Camilla's lady
No, a whip in the House of Lords.
Oh, yeah.
The official, one of
Sure.
the government whips in the Lords. I really don't know what the king thinks he's doing. This does not look like an occasion of state. It looks at best like a Buckingham Palace garden party.
Oh, and they really are for the hoi polloi.
They are. That is, and again, it's a profoundly difficult point. This is the first time that any king has taken the initiative in who turns up in the Abbey.
Yeah.
That up to this point, from the Glorious Revolution, it was the political establishment as represented in Parliament, and with Parliament being there as the representative of the nation. I think what this shows is two things have happened. There's been an incredible decline in the status of Parliament and the regard in which the king couldn't have got away with it otherwise. But I do think it's dangerous when the monarchy assumes the initiative in saying, this represents the nation. Winners of the British Empire Medal, a collection, a highly miscellaneous collection of TV entertainers who...
Ant and Dec.
Ant and Dec. Why are they there? Well, we're told they were ambassadors for the Prince's Trust. Now, the Prince's Trust is a really good thing, and it's done splendid things. But why are Ant and Dec ambassadors for it? They are there to put hooks into middle-ranked people in the city who will cascade money.
Yeah.
That is their only function. And this, again, is one of the problems with the King's rule. We saw it with the Shady Sheikh and whatever. There is an unease about what he will do to raise money for his favourite charities.
Yeah.
And if you actually look at the people in the Abbey, there's that faint whiff of, well, why are they there?
Yeah. No aristocrats, no dukes.
Very few. Well, there are one or two.
Not many.
Very few, very few.
I've had my ear bent by a duke. Very unhappy he was.
Was that the Duke of Rutland by any chance, who has been exceedingly vociferous on the subject? But then, of course, again, you see, that's the result of Blair. That's the result of the removal of the peers, the hereditary peers from Parliament. But it also goes back, and again, it's something really interesting. It's a big question. What is the support of the monarchy? Up to 1911, it was taken for granted. It was the peers, as the monarchy was the apex of this landed governing class. But in 1911, what does George V, the king's great-grandfather, do? He kicks the aristocracy in the teeth when he agrees to the passing of the Parliament Act, which removes the veto of the Lords. So in a sense, what we're seeing, I would say, is the final stage of the democratisation of the monarchy. Victoria, up there on her monument, said, I shall never be queen of a democracy. Now, King Charles is king of a levelling democracy. But there is the unease as to how you combine that with royalty.
We could listen to you all day, David, but we do have to move on, I'm afraid.
Very interesting,
most parents do not believe that Scottish schools are preparing children for the modern world of work, a survey suggests.
65% said they're more focused on securing university places, I'm sure that's right, than the best interest of children.
So joining us now for more on this is the director at Breslin Public Policy, Tony Breslin. Good morning, Tony. Anybody who's had any children go through school in the last 10 years can relate to the concept, actually, that the education system isn't preparing our children necessarily for the world of work, but otherwise just funneling them into university. But the changes which have taken place in the workplace have been at such a speed that this problem has got worse, hasn't it?
Well, I'm not sure I accept the full statement about too many going to university. It's a view often put by those who've been, and they're talking about other people's children. I was the first in my family to go to university, and it was transformative. So let's not turn it into an either or. But you are absolutely right that we are still teaching a curriculum that has its origins in the early 20th century, in the early 21st century. Part of the problem, of course, is that whenever the kind of reforms that have been proposed by the school that has sponsored this research are exactly the reforms that are sometimes described as dumbing down or whatever. But certainly we need to prepare young people for a very different world than the one I was prepared for and the one that our parents and grandparents were prepared for. And I think you're seeing the parental reaction to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And no doubt there needs to be huge changes. Tony, I'm so sorry we have to keep it short this morning, but obviously here from Buckingham Palace there's a lot going on. Anything could happen at any moment. We're doing the countdown, of course, to the coronation all this week on GB News, including Princess Anne's recent thoughts on a slimmed-down monarchy. That and more after the news.
Bev, thank you. Here are the headlines at 11:33. Unions and NHS employers are meeting today in the hope to resolve the long-running pay dispute between health workers and the government. Members of the Royal College of Nursing and Unite have rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise for this year and a cash sum for last year. But other unions, including Unison, the GMB, and those representing midwives and physiotherapists, have voted in favour. Food inflation went up to another record high in April, but lower prices are on the horizon, according to the British Retail Consortium. Grocery prices rose by 15.7% last month, the biggest annual increase in records going back almost 2 decades. The figures show that prices for non-food items, however, slowed down because of spring discounts on clothing and furniture. House prices showed signs of stabilising last month, according to mortgage lender Nationwide. The price of a home rose by 0.5% after falling for the past 7 months. Compared to April last year, the average house price was down 2.7%. The final flights evacuating British nationals from Sudan are due to land in Britain today. Sudanese doctors working for the NHS are among the passengers. According to government figures, almost 2,200 people have been evacuated. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says the British mission in Sudan isn't over, despite the end of the evacuation by air.
There's still an ongoing humanitarian situation. We still have a presence at Port Sudan, both a military presence and a number of other government officials to help British nationals and their dependents leave the country. So we have concluded the air operation, the air evacuation out of Wadi Sedna to the north of Khartoum. It was a complicated operation, but I think one that has proven to be very successful.
Kensington Palace has released a photograph of Princess Charlotte to mark her 8th birthday. The picture was taken by her mother, the Princess of Wales, in Windsor this weekend. The Princess is 3rd in line to the throne. Lovely photo. TV, online, DAB, digital and tune in. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's market. The pound will buy you $1.2465 and €1.1375 euros. The price of gold is £1,593 and 81 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,862 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice.
I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The people.
Well, here we are, we're still at Buckingham Palace. Now, a little bit of breaking news, Dave, because we've just noticed behind us at Buckingham Palace, the balcony, famous balcony windows have opened. Now, no royal is about to appear. We're obviously getting it spruced up for when the King and Camilla appear with other royals after the coronation service on Saturday.
Yes, I mean, all our memories are the last royal who appeared on that balcony. The Queen in her final public appearance at her Jubilee with the Duke of Kent behind her. But that balcony is why we are here. That is the complete centrepiece of this. This is laid out just before the First World War for what's happening now, so as the monarch can greet the people. The whole thing that we're going to see for the coronation, this extraordinary processional route of the Mall, you go through the triumphal arch of the Admiralty, you come along, and then this enormous space where we are, fanning out. It's there, dare one say it, for public adoration.
Exactly, and people will flock to it. So who was the first monarch to appear on the balcony, David?
That particular balcony, it's George V.
Right, the Queen's grandfather.
I don't even know if Edward VII ever did. Remember, we forget this. This front of Buckingham Palace is a century more modern than the White House. It only dates from 1913. It's only 110 years old. So it's George V. And there's this complete revolution of the monarchy. We talk about the House of Windsor. The House of Windsor is only founded in 1917. And what it is deliberately is a democrat. It's that paradox. It's a democratic monarchy for Britain, which is really a royal republic. And again, this is the point that the coronation should have been making much more vigorously. We are a royal republic. We are as bound by law, we're as bound by propriety of government as any republic. In fact, we invent all of these under our monarchy. That's why it survived, not because of by the grace of God or mystical mumbo-jumbo.
And the King on the coronation on Saturday, he'll be there with the Queen, but also with other senior royals. We'll see William and Kate.
certainly with the Prince and Princess of Wales, surely with the Princess Royal.
She should be
Princess
there.
Anne. I would imagine so. In fact, I would have thought traditionally will be all the working royals and also the children.
Yeah.
If you can't, there's a most wonderful shot of that balcony for the coronation of George VI, of the king's grandfather, with George VI, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and then Princess, the future Queen Elizabeth II, and Princess Margaret, both of them wearing little coronets, which I don't think. I mean, I'd love to see Charlotte and George in a kind of little toy but I don't think it will be done.
Think that's
as part of this new normalisation.
Yeah.
Which, don't you think? I think it's a shame. I mean, why bother with a half-hearted coronation? You know, the last time this was done, rather half-heartedly, was William IV. And do you know what it was known as? The half-crownation.
And we've waited a long time for this one.
We've waited 70 years.
Yeah.
The next one, dare one say, it will probably be in a rather shorter gap. But these are major events. And the sense of slight short change is worrying.
What do you think they're doing up there?
Well, you don't feel there is, then?
What's that?
The slight sense of short change.
No, I was just thinking, all of this is beautifully interesting. I love listening to you talk about the royal family, David. But I'm just thinking, for people at home, what do the royal family represent? Why is their appeal so long-lasting? And I think it's more about the fact that they are a real-life soap opera. They are a story. They are characters that we take out of our doll's house and we play with a little bit, and we like to see their stories, and we put them in the doll's house. That's the appeal, isn't it?
I think that is actually one of the vital things, and it was said brilliantly by Walter Badger, the great 19th century theorist of monarchy. He said, republics are boring because there are lots of dull people doing dull things. A monarchy is interesting because a royal family is a specially bound edition of a universal fact. We all have families.
That's right.
And so it spells it out. But you see, I think you need to balance the soap opera, which, for heaven's sake, look, I'm the authority on the Tudors, which make this lot look,
like amateurs.
Total amateurs. But equally, it has a major constitutional function, and that's why it survived. And you need to balance the soap opera with the broader political meaning. And I have an uneasy feeling that is being done less and less well, and certainly trying to use religion and the Church of England, or indeed Defender of Faiths, as the way you do that, I just don't think works for most people.
Well, just explain what you mean by that. So you mean therefore the British public, the media, is too now interested in the minutiae of whether Meghan has said something that might have upset Kate Middleton, blah, 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 as opposed to a greater understanding of the significance of the symbolism and the ideology, effectively, that the royal family represents.
I think you need to balance the two. I mean, look, I am pleased. I bitterly resent any notion that I'm not interested in gossip. And
you're a real gossip.
And the naughtier,
Trust me, he loves gossip.
The naughtier, the better. So yes, that's all part of the magic. And indeed, one of the things that's extraordinary about this coronation is how it's normalised bad behaviour. If you actually, the only reason that the royal family has gone in the direction it has, the only reason that Elizabeth sat on the throne, that Charles is on the throne, is because Edward VIII got married a divorcee, and suddenly divorce is okay.
Two divorcees on the throne.
Two divorcees on the throne. Indeed, I was saying when I was joking at that dinner party we were talking about before, that the ghosts of Anne Boleyn and Mrs. Simpson are up there looking down and saying, we're vindicated. We've triumphed. Now, that suggests something very extraordinary, that the whole, if you look at the earlier 20th century monarchy, yes, it was a family, but what it tried to do was to present itself as the ideal family. Do you remember the fuss about poor old Charles and Diana when the marriage first broke up? There was talk he couldn't possibly succeed because divorce was unthinkable, and somehow we've all got used to it. We're just waiting for one thing, which is the first out gay member of the royal family, but it'll come.
Oh, sure, I'm surprised it hasn't come already. No names mentioned, of course, but I mean, three of the Queen's children... exactly. Three of the Queen's children's marriages ended in divorce.
Of course. But, as it were, that was seen as almost shame. Now suddenly it's stepped into the open. Queen divorced Camilla will sit upon the throne. King divorced Charles will sit upon the throne and be blessed, I would imagine, in some ways, through gritted teeth by the Church of England, which denied them a marriage.
Yeah.
Talking of the Queen's children, Princess Anne has given an interview, a rather unprecedented interview, a sit-down interview. Let's have a little listen to what she said.
Oh, I think the slim down was said in a day when there were a few more people around to make that seem like a justifiable comment.
The world changes a bit.
It changes a bit. I mean, it doesn't sound like a good idea from where I'm standing, I have to say.
Sure, it does
I'm
not.
not quite sure what else, we can...
She chooses her words carefully too, doesn't she?
She does. I mean, she's very polished at it too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you contrast that with the disaster of her brother, with Emily Maitlis,
yes.
She knew what she wanted to say. She says it very clearly. She says it forcefully and succinctly, and with just enough edge that we all pay attention.
The idea of a slimmed-down monarchy being she doesn't think it's any...
That she doesn't think it's a good idea.
Because it's slimmed down so much already.
That, in fact, as I said, it's slimmed down virtually to the point of disappearance. And you've got now this older generation of the Queen's cousins, the Duke of Gloucester, the Duke of Kent.
But she was part of it because she did not give her children titles and they've never worked as royals, Star and Peter Phillips.
I think she was so aware of the burden. And she's a highly intelligent woman.
She's full of common sense.
And she's full of fun. But I think she is a highly intelligent, but also common sense. And she knew the burden. Again, Princess Margaret knew the burden.
Despair.
And it's no accident that their children, although they got titles, have never used them, never deployed them. David Linley just gives his title to very, very expensive furniture for the upper classes.
Yeah.
Can we just reflect, actually, I think it's worth doing this week, on the idea that it used to be the common debate point in the newspapers, on the press, should Charles step aside and just allow William to become king? On a week like this, we realise that would have been a terrible mistake.
And also, it's legally impossible.
Yeah.
The succession, again, people have this notion that the king could get up one morning and say, "Oh, I just don't feel up to it, we'll go on and take over."
Yeah.
We've got a parliamentary monarchy. The succession is laid down by Act of Parliament. When we were talking about Edward VIII abdicating, he signs a very formal letter of abdication. It has no legal effect whatever until an Act of Parliament is passed saying that it's taken effect. The monarchy can do nothing by itself formally.
It's interesting because also the palace played a blinder when Charles got engaged to Camilla. I wrote the story on the front page of the Times. They wrote the statement said it is intended that she will be known as Princess Consort when he comes to the throne. We wrote very firmly in the Times, rot. She will be queen because the king's wife becomes queen unless they change the law.
It's not actually law, it's convention. It's convention. And if the king's wife did not become queen, the abdication was completely unnecessary. Mrs. Simpson could have simply been known as Mrs. Simpson Consort. You know, and we'd have spared ourselves an
morganatic marriage. They talked about it at the time.
Marriage, which is unknown at English law. This again is the problem. English law is clear that the wife still, I'm afraid, assumes the status of her husband.
Yeah.
But, of course, the husband doesn't assume the status of his wife, which is why, terrible. I think us chaps should feel deeply aggrieved and complain to the Equal Opportunities Commission that, poor old Prince Philip wasn't king.
No.
Of course, going back to the Middle Ages, he would have been, and moreover, it would have become the House of Mountbatten, and it would have changed title, but we're a parliamentary monarchy. We're a royal republic, and that doesn't happen.
But it would have been a rumpus if she wasn't queen.
Yes.
Charles would have kicked off behind the scenes, big time.
You mean Camilla?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that there's another point which I think is really, really important. I remember, because I'm so ancient, I watched the Coronation of '53, and even as an 8-year-old boy, I thought she looks lonely.
The Queen?
The Queen. Crowned alone, of course.
Yeah.
Not even with Prince Philip in actual formal attendance on her. It's a gigantic responsibility. And the way the coronation will work now is how it's intended to work, with the mutual support of a king and queen, the double act, as it were, the grand act of the coronation of the king, the rather reduced coronation of the queen, but that sense of mutuality and support which there should be in a marriage.
Can I ask you where you first found your love of the royal family?
I don't love the royal family. I'm a rational monarchist.
Okay.
I believe that the monarchy is one of the great continuous threads of our history. I believe that why our country works is that we've avoided revolution. In fact, we did something even more remarkable. We reversed a revolution in the 17th century, and that keeping monarchy keeps a sense of legitimacy, of continuity, of the essence of what we are. Look what's going on in France at the moment, where you've had a country that tore itself apart in a revolution and has never put itself together again. Do you know what France has had? It has had 5 republics. It has had 2 empires and 2 monarchies in 200 years. There's a single successful republic.
And do you even know how many times you've been inside this building behind us?
I've lost count.
Any particularly memorable ones?
Yes, when right, I'll tell the story. When I was made
We've got a minute.
It's a short story. When I was made CBE, and it was explained, the Queen will exchange words with you, and when she's finished with you, she'll shake hands. The Queen said, "Oh, Dr. Starkey, what is your next television series on?" I said, "You, ma'am." Out. a look of thunder.
But you've never managed to get on that balcony, David.
Maybe. I was saying, I was going to say the scene of my public execution.
Yes.
For lèse majesté. Yes.
And now you've got your another documentary tonight. Is it tonight?
Another one's broadcasting tonight.
7 o'clock this evening on GBNews.
This brings it right up to date, and I'm afraid it ends with my predicting, and Bev will get cross with me, this is the last coronation.
No.
I think you poured so much wine into a very old bottle that it's about to burst.
I really sincerely hope you're wrong.
And I hope I'm wrong.
We might have to carry on this conversation same time tomorrow,
Where are you
David
tomorrow?
Starkey. That's a cliffhanger to end the show on. We
Don't
have
forget
come
to watch
the
at
end.
7 p.m.
It's flown
tonight.
by. Yeah,
Yeah.
watch David tonight at 7 o'clock. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. This has been To The Point with Andrew and Bev. We'll be back tomorrow morning
at Buckingham Palace. Don't
9:30.
forget, be there with us.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Dry and a bright day out there for most today. Some places fine and sunny, other places fairly cloudy. The winds, though, for most are light because high pressure is dominating across the UK. Slowly but surely, weather fronts will be approaching as we go through the rest of this week. But for the next couple of days, as I said, most places will be dry. Not completely dry. 1 or 2 light showers likely over the hills of northwest England, southwest Scotland. It is fairly cloudy, but most places reasonably bright. And we'll see some sunny spells for South Wales, southwest England, and at times across northern Scotland. A few holes are possible elsewhere. And the sun makes all the difference. Where we see it, 19 degrees is possible, generally mid-teens. And it feels quite cool again, where there is a bit of a breeze off the North Sea on some eastern coasts. A few scattered light showers continue over southern Scotland, northern England this evening, but most places will stay dry overnight. A chance of a bit of rain working across Northern Ireland through the early hours as well. Temperatures holding up in the mid to high single figures, some places in the west staying in double figures. On to Wednesday, and again, most places dry and bright, so perhaps a little bit more in the way of thicker cloud across parts of Scotland, a greater chance of some showers through the central belt especially, and up the west coast. Not as much cloud across England and Wales, better chance of seeing some lengthier spells of sunshine during Wednesday. The breeze just picking up a little in the southwest, but here again, top temperatures in the high teens, and it won't be quite so chilly on those North Sea coasts, although temperatures will still be generally a touch below average for the time of year. As we go through Wednesday evening, the breeze will start to strengthen further, and by the time we get to Thursday, increasing chance of seeing some wet weather coming in from the southwest. So many places still dry to start with on Thursday, but by Friday we're looking at some pretty heavy showers, and the weather looking a bit mixed into the next bank holiday weekend.
The Coronation is an event that has remained virtually unchanged for 1,000 years.
And we invite you to join us here on GB News for this historic event.
All next week, we'll be talking to you in towns and cities across the country.
Building up to the main event on Saturday.
From pageantry at the palace to unearthing the history of this ancient ritual.
Come celebrate.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 12 noon, a very good afternoon and welcome to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this Tuesday lunchtime. A slimmed-down monarchy is not a good idea, so says Princess Anne. As the latest poll reveals King Charles's popularity on the rise, 62% now think he will be good for the monarchy, up